The first shot rang out, and Ethan Ward hit the dirt. The bullet splintered the water trough right where his head had been. Not a warning shot. This was business. His heart hammered, but it wasn't from fear. It was a cold, familiar anger. The kind that had kept him alive through the war and through the 5 long years since. "You're trespassing!" he yelled, his voice cutting across the dusty yard. 3 men were spread out in front of his cabin. Not professionals. They'd been too loud, too clumsy, but they were dangerous. Men sent to deliver a message from a powerful man. A voice shot back, laced with a sneer. "Ain't private if you can't hold it, old man." Ethan grabbed the rifle leaning against the barn. He wasn't old, he was 45, but the years had weathered him, carved deep lines into his face. He'd seen enough trouble to last 2 lifetimes. He counted to 3. Then he rolled, came up on one knee, and fired. The first man screamed, clutching his shoulder. The second man turned, but not fast enough. Ethan's next shot took him in the leg. The third man, seeing how this was going, threw his gun down and his hands up. Ethan rose slowly, his rifle never leaving the last man. "Tell Caldwell I'm not selling," the man spat. "Nobody wants this dirt but you and the judge always gets what he wants." Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you tell him I'll bury him on this very dirt before I give it up." He watched them limp away, dragging their wounded. The leader turned back, his face a mask of pain and hate. "You're just one man, Ward. Caldwell's got the whole town in his pocket." Ethan stood like a statue until they were gone. His shoulder burned. A bullet had grazed him, tearing through his shirt. It exposed an older, uglier scar beneath, a souvenir from a battle he tried hard to forget. Inside his cabin, he cleaned the wound. The room was simple: a bed, a table, a stove. The walls were bare except for one shelf. On that shelf was a single silver-framed photograph. He looked up at it. His wife, Emma, smiled back at him. His little girl, Sarah, was on her lap. Frozen in time. A time before the fire. "Got careless today," he whispered to the empty room. The memory came, as it always did, the smell of smoke, the desperate run home, the sight of the black plume rising against the blue sky, the awful, gut-wrenching moment he knew he was too late. He'd been helping a neighbor, Tom Peterson, with his barn. He'd chosen a neighbor over his own family. He had promised Emma he wouldn't be long. A promise he broke. By the time he got back, his home was an inferno. "I wasn't there," he whispered to the photograph. "I didn't protect you." The wind howled outside. A storm was coming, the kind that tore across the plains with a terrible fury. Ethan bandaged his shoulder and went back to work. The farm didn't wait for a man's grief. Hours later, rain hammered the roof. Lightning lit up the cabin in blinding flashes. Ethan sat at his table, a cold cup of coffee in his hands. The emptiness of his life felt bigger on nights like this. 5 years. 5 years of just existing. Then he heard it. A sound that wasn't the storm. A faint whinny of a horse. Not his horse. This one was out on the road. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Through the rain-streaked glass he saw a shape. A small, dark figure standing in the middle of the muddy road. Lightning flashed again, turning night into day for one shocking second. It was a child. A little girl, no older than 6, clutching 2 bundles to her chest. And behind her, crumpled in the tall grass, was the body of a woman. Ethan was out the door before he could think. The rain hit him like a physical blow, soaking him to the bone. He ran down the path, his boots slipping in the thick mud. The child didn't move. She just stood there, her face turned up to his, rain streaming down her cheeks. As he got closer, he saw the bundles weren't just bundles. They were babies. Twins, wrapped tightly against the storm. The little girl's dress was soaked, clinging to her small frame. Her face was a perfect mask of determination. "What happened?" he shouted over the wind. Her voice was steady, like she had practiced the words 100 times. "Mama's legs are broken. Her in-laws did it." Her chin lifted. Her lips trembled just a little. You don't have any children. Ethan stared at her, confused. What did that have to do with anything? Then she delivered the final line, the line that changed everything. From now on, you are our father. The words hit him like a shotgun blast to the chest. He looked past the strange little girl to the woman on the ground. Another flash of lightning revealed her face. She was young, maybe 25. Her dress was torn and bloody around her legs, which lay at impossible angles. Ethan crouched down to the girl's level. There was no fear in her eyes, only a fierce, desperate plea. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Lily," she said. "These are Emma and Jacob." The name Emma was like a knife in his gut. He pushed the feeling down. "And your mother?" "Grace Sullivan." Thunder cracked, shaking the ground. One of the babies started to cry, a thin, weak sound almost lost in the storm. "Let me help your mother," Ethan said, rising. He knelt beside Grace. Her eyes fluttered open. They were blue, glazed with pain, but she was aware. Fear flashed in them as he leaned over her. "I'm taking you to shelter," he said. "Your legs need to be tended." She tried to speak. A faint whisper escaped her lips. "Caldwell, don't let him find us." And then she was gone again, lost to the pain. The name hit Ethan like a bucket of ice water. Caldwell. The same man who wanted his land. The same man who'd sent 3 thugs to kill him just that afternoon. What in God's name was the connection between this broken woman and Judge Harlan Caldwell, the most powerful man in the county? There was no time to figure it out. He carefully lifted Grace into his arms. She was light, almost fragile. He carried her to his wagon, then went back for the children. Lily wouldn't give up the twins until her mother was safely laid in the wagon bed. Only then did she let him take them, one by one. The ride back to the cabin was a slow, painful crawl. Every bump and rut in the road made Grace gasp in agony. Lily sat beside him, silent and rigid. Inside, he worked fast. He laid Grace on his bed, the only bed he had. He stoked the fire, trying to chase the chill from the room. He helped Lily get the twins dry and wrapped in clean blankets. The little girl handled the babies with the confidence of a woman twice her age. Grace drifted in and out of consciousness. Both her legs were broken. One was a simple fracture. The other was a compound break, the bone jutting gruesomely through the skin. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. "How did this happen?" he asked Lily. Her eyes went dark. "The bad men came. They said we belonged to Grandfather Caldwell. Mama said no. They hurt her until the bones broke." Her voice was flat, like she was reading a weather report. But her little hands were shaking. Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew what he had to do. He'd set bones before, in the war. He had whiskey, but not enough to knock her out completely. "Lily," he said quietly, "I need to set your mother's legs. It's going to hurt her. A lot. Can you take the babies to the other side of the room?" She shook her head. "I stay with Mama." He didn't argue. He got what he needed. Clean cloth, straight pieces of wood for splints, and the bottle of whiskey. He gently shook Grace awake. Her eyes flew open, clouded with pain. She tried to push herself away. "Your legs need setting," he explained. "This will help with the pain, but not all of it." Her gaze found Lily and the twins. Seeing them safe, some of the tension left her body. "Do what you must," she whispered. He helped her drink, waited for the alcohol to take hold, then went to work. Grace bit down on a piece of leather, her muffled screams filling the small cabin. Lily never looked away. Not once. When it was over, Grace was unconscious again. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. Exhaustion hit him like a wave. The sudden invasion of his quiet life left him feeling raw and exposed. He made a simple meal of bread and what was left of his stew. Lily ate slowly, her eyes fixed on her mother. "Mama said someone would help," she said after a long silence. "She promised." Ethan didn't know what to say. He didn't know why he'd brought them here. They were connected to Caldwell, his enemy. Harboring them was asking for a death sentence. The smart thing to do was take them to town in the morning, leave them with the doctor or the church. But as he watched Lily gently tend to her baby brother, something stirred in his chest, a feeling he thought was long dead and buried with his family. Responsibility. The storm raged through the night. Ethan sat at the table, keeping watch. Judge Caldwell was hunting this family. If that was true, there was no safety for them in town. The judge owned the town, from the sheriff right down to the preacher. Near dawn, Grace stirred again. He brought her water. Her eyes were clearer now. "Why did you help us?" she whispered. Ethan thought for a moment. The child asked. Grace looked at Lily, sleeping soundly by the fire. "She's always been the brave one." She hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "You know who's looking for us?" He nodded. "Caldwell." "Then you know the risk you're taking." Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Ethan Ward. This is my farm." Recognition flickered in her eyes. Ward. The man who won't sell to the judge. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He hates you almost as much as he hates me." His interest sharpened. "Why does he want you and the children?" Her face tightened with pain. "The twins, they are his grandchildren. In a way, he believes they belong to him." Her voice turned to steel. "He's wrong." Before he could ask more, she was asleep again. He returned to his chair, her words echoing in his mind. Grandchildren. This was getting more complicated by the second. Whatever he did next, it would bring the full wrath of Judge Caldwell down on his head. Morning came with clear skies. He did his chores, his mind racing. When he got back to the cabin, Lily was awake, feeding one of the twins. She looked up at him. "You didn't leave," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of surprise. "This is my home," he said, hanging his hat by the door. "You didn't leave us," she clarified, her eyes too old for her face. "Others did." A lump formed in his throat. He turned away, busying himself at the stove. "Your mother needs to heal. You'll all stay until she's better." Behind him, he heard a soft sigh of relief. He didn't look back. He couldn't face the trust he saw in that little girl's eyes. Trust he hadn't earned and wasn't sure he could keep. He knew what he had to do. These people were here for a reason, and Caldwell wanted them. That was reason enough. He needed supplies, food, medicine. That meant going to town. The thought made his jaw tighten, but he had no choice. "I have to go to town," he told Lily. "Will you be all right here alone?" She nodded. "I took care of them before you." Then she tilted her head, her gaze piercing. "Will you come back?" The question cut deeper than he expected. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I'll come back." He hitched his horse and set out for redemption. The town square was dominated by two buildings, the church and the red brick courthouse where Judge Caldwell handed down his own brand of justice. His first stop was the general store. The owner, Joshua Reed, was one of the few men in town who treated him fairly. "Ethan Ward," Reed said, surprised. "Twice in 1 month. That's a record." His smile faded. "You look like you've had a rough night." Ethan started gathering supplies. Flour, coffee, bandages, and then, more unusual items, diapers, powdered milk, soft flannel. Reed watched him, his eyes curious. "Expecting company?" Ethan didn't look up. "Just restocking." As Ethan paid, Reed leaned closer. "You should know," he whispered. "The judge is looking for a woman and 3 kids. Posted a notice this morning. Says she's mentally unstable. Ran off with his grandkids after her husband died." Ethan's face remained a mask of stone. "Sheriff's organizing a search party," Reed continued. "Word is, they were last seen heading west, toward your place." He paused, his eyes meaningful. "The judge seems mighty anxious to find them." Ethan took his supplies, but Reed spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "Be careful who you trust, Ward. Even the church mice report to the judge these days." Ethan knew his next stop should have been the doctor's office, but Reed's warning echoed in his ears. The doctor would report him in a heartbeat. Instead, he turned the wagon toward a small house on the edge of town, the home of Martha Quinn. Martha was a midwife and a healer. More importantly, she was one of the only people in town who wasn't afraid of Judge Caldwell. She answered the door, her sharp eyes taking in his appearance and the supplies in his wagon. "Ethan Ward," she said, her voice brisk, "what brings you to my door?" "I need medical supplies," he said, "and I'd prefer not to go through town channels." Her eyebrows rose. She glanced at the bandages he'd already bought. "Compound fracture?" she asked bluntly. Ethan was taken aback by her sharpness. "How did you know?" "Those supplies," she said, ticking points off on her fingers. "Your reluctance to see the doctor, and the judge's sudden interest in a woman with, as he put it, unstable legs. I wasn't born yesterday, Ward. Come in." Inside, her house smelled of dried herbs. She moved around the room, gathering what he needed. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad enough. Both legs. One bone through the skin." Her mouth tightened. "Those weren't accidents." "No." She stopped and faced him. "You're harboring Grace Sullivan and her children." It wasn't a question. He nodded. Martha sighed, a weary, knowing sound. "I delivered those twins 5 months ago. Helped Grace through a difficult birth, while that monster of a father-in-law paced outside, demanding to know if they were boys." She looked him dead in the eye. "You know her husband, Michael, died 2 weeks ago? A falling accident at the lumber mill. The one the judge owns." Ethan's blood ran cold. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a dark and ugly picture. "Why is Caldwell so desperate to find them?" he asked. Martha's expression grew grim. "Because Michael discovered something. Documents. Proof that the judge has been stealing land for years. Your land, my land, dozens of others." She met his gaze. "Michael confronted him. 3 days later, he was dead. Grace knew she was next. Or worse, that he'd take the twins and get rid of her and Lily. So this was it. The dark secret at the heart of redemption. A web of corruption and murder, with Judge Caldwell at its center." "Be careful, Ethan," Martha warned as he left. "The judge isn't just powerful, he's desperate. And a desperate man is the most dangerous kind." As he turned to leave, she added one more thing. "The church holds services tomorrow. Reverend Thomas has been asking after you." He frowned. "I haven't been to church in years." "Perhaps," Martha said cryptically, "but faith has a way of finding us when we need it most." The ride back was a blur. His quiet life had been shattered. He was no longer just a stubborn farmer refusing to sell. He was a man harboring a witness, a man with knowledge that could get him killed. He was in the heart of the storm now. Lily met him at the door. "You came back," she said, a faint question still in her voice. "I said I would." He unpacked the supplies. He showed Lily how to prepare the powdered milk. He was struck again by her competence, her fierce devotion to her family. Later, he tended to Grace's injuries. The medicine Martha had given him eased her pain, and she slept through it. He sat and watched her, this beautiful broken woman who had crashed into his life. A small hand tugged his sleeve. It was Lily, holding out a cup of coffee. "Mama says we must always thank those who help us," she said. Then she looked at him with those old, serious eyes. "Why did you help us, Mr. Ward?" How could he explain it? That her words on the road had broken through 5 years of ice? That in her mother's brokenness, he saw his own? "Sometimes," he said finally, "people just need help. That's all." She seemed to accept this. "Mama said someone would come. She promised." She looked at the bed. She doesn't break promises. That evening, Grace woke up fully. Her eyes were clearer. She saw him across the room, and for the first time he didn't see fear in her gaze. He saw weariness and a sliver of hope. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "Mrs. Quinn sent medicine." "Martha?" A flicker of relief crossed her face. "You spoke with her?" "She told me what happened. About your husband. About Caldwell. Grace's eyes hardened. Then you know the danger we've brought to your door. Why would you risk yourself for strangers? He walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. Judge Caldwell has been trying to run me off my land for 3 years, he said. Yesterday, he sent men to deliver a message. I sent them back with one of my own. Understanding dawned in her eyes. We have a common enemy. It seems so. Michael found documents, she said, her voice low and urgent. Proof. Forged deeds, threats, accidents arranged for those who wouldn't sell. Your name was on his list, Ethan. The use of his first name felt strangely intimate. That's why Michael died, she continued, and that's why the judge wants the children. He thinks if he controls them, he controls me, and he needs me silenced. These documents, he asked, where are they? Hidden, she said, somewhere only I know. She glanced at Lily, who was out of earshot. If anything happens to me, Martha knows what to do. He told her about the search parties, about the judge's story that she was mentally unstable. She laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Of course, he's Judge Caldwell, pillar of the community. Her eyes blazed. He killed my husband, Ethan. I know it as surely as I know my own name. He looked at this woman, her body broken, but her spirit like tempered steel. He saw something in her that resonated deep within him. He walked to the shelf and took down the silver-framed photograph. He brought it to her. She took it, her eyes widening as she saw the smiling faces of Emma and Sarah. My wife and daughter, he said, the words thick with old pain. A fire took them 5 years ago. I was helping a neighbor. I wasn't home. Grace handed the photo back, her eyes full of a deep, shared understanding. I'm sorry. He returned the frame to its shelf. After that, I rebuilt the cabin, but not my life. I kept to myself. Until yesterday, when a little girl stood in the rain and claimed me as her father. A small, sad smile touched Grace's lips. Lily has a way of knowing what people need to hear. It wasn't what I needed to hear, he corrected gently. It was what I needed to remember. One of the twins began to cry, breaking the spell. Grace tried to move, to rise, but winced in pain. Stay still, Ethan said. I'll get him. He lifted the crying infant from the makeshift cradle. Jacob. He brought the baby to Grace, placing him carefully in her arms. You've made yourself a target, she said softly. I already was, he replied. The difference is, now I have something worth defending. For the first time in 5 years, the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt like a fortress. And as he took his chair by the door, his rifle across his knees, he knew he wasn't just a lonely man anymore. He was a guardian. The next morning, Lily caught him off guard with a question that hit him like a physical blow. My papa went to heaven too, she said as he served her breakfast. The bad men pushed him. Mama doesn't think I know, but I saw it from the window. Ethan froze. You saw your father die? She nodded, her expression chillingly calm. He was on the balcony with grandfather. They were yelling. Then grandfather's friend pushed him. He fell. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes ancient. Grandfather saw me watching. That's when I knew we had to run. The revelation was staggering. This child hadn't just lost her father. She'd witnessed his murder, and she had carried that terrible secret alone. Later, he told Grace what Lily had seen. Tears streamed down her face. My poor brave girl, she whispered. That afternoon, he made a decision. It was a risk, a huge one. But hiding was no longer an option. We're going to town tomorrow, he announced. To the church. Grace looked at him, her eyes wide with fear. That's insane. Caldwell will have men everywhere. Which is why it's the last place he'll expect us to be, Ethan countered. Hiding in plain sight. We need to show him we're not afraid. We need to show the town you're not alone anymore. She argued, but he was firm. Sooner or later, Caldwell would come for them. It was better to face him on their own terms. Sunday morning, they rode into Redemption. Ethan carried Grace, her legs splinted and useless, into the church. Lily followed, carrying one of the twins. The reclusive widower, the injured woman, and the 3 children. Every eye in the church was on them. The whispers started immediately. Reverend Thomas, a man known to be in Caldwell's pocket, stammered a greeting. Ethan chose a pew right at the front, in full view of everyone. Sheriff Davis, Caldwell's right-hand man, glared at them from across the aisle. And then, a new presence entered the church. A tall, imposing figure who took a seat in the back. Judge Harlan Caldwell had arrived. Grace tensed beside him. "He's here." "I know," Ethan murmured. "Don't look back." The service was a blur of tension. When it was over, the test began. People filed past, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Martha Quinn appeared, her expression worried. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "The judge called a town council meeting this morning. He's had Grace declared mentally unstable. He's been appointed temporary guardian of the twins. The sheriff has papers to take them into custody." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged." The voice was deep and cold. Judge Caldwell stood in the aisle, Sheriff Davis at his side. The judge's face was a mask of false concern. "Grace, my dear," he said, his voice dripping with sympathy. "We've been so worried. Your grief has clearly affected your mind." Grace's voice was steady. "There was no accident, Judge. Your men broke my legs." A ripple of shock went through the church. Caldwell didn't flinch. "You see, these delusions are precisely why the children must be placed in my care." The sheriff stepped forward, his hand on his pistol. "Mrs. Sullivan." "Those children aren't going anywhere," Ethan interrupted, standing slowly. The judge turned his cold eyes on him. "Mr. Ward, your tragic history is well known. The fire, your wife and child. Perhaps that explains your interference in matters that do not concern you." The insult hit its mark, but Ethan's face was stone. "Your business became my concern when your men left this woman to die on my property." "A baseless accusation," Caldwell replied smoothly, but then a small voice cut through the tension. "I saw you." Lily stood, her small body rigid. "I saw you and the other man push my papa off the balcony." The church fell silent. Caldwell stared at the child, momentarily stunned. "What did you say, girl?" "I saw you kill my papa," she repeated, her voice unwavering. "You saw me watching. That's why you want us, because I know what you did." Caldwell recovered, putting on a show of pity. "The poor child. You see how her mother's madness has infected her." But the damage was done. Doubt was creeping into the faces of the townsfolk. A child's accusation, delivered with such conviction, was a powerful thing. Then an unexpected voice joined the fray. "Your papers mean nothing in God's house." It was Reverend Thomas. He stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "I have stood silent for too long," he announced, his voice gaining strength. "I knew Michael Sullivan's death was no accident. I will not compound that sin by allowing you to take these children from their mother." The crowd murmured. The Reverend's words had changed everything. Caldwell's carefully crafted story was unraveling. The judge's composure finally cracked. Rage flashed in his eyes just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold smile. "This isn't over," he said. He turned to Ethan, his voice a low threat. "You've made a grave mistake, Ward. Perhaps you should ask Grace about her family connections. She's not what she seems." With that, he strode out of the church, the sheriff trailing behind him. The remaining townsfolk stared, unsure what to believe. Ethan knelt beside Grace. "What did he mean about my family?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A trick," Ethan said, trying to reassure her, trying to sow doubt. But Caldwell's words had been too certain, as if he knew a secret that could change everything. As they left the church, Joshua Reed, the storekeeper, slipped a piece of paper into Ethan's hand. "If trouble comes," he whispered, "send word to this address. You have friends." On the ride back, Grace was quiet. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "My mother was Rebecca Quinn," she said. "Martha's younger sister. She married a man named James Harlow. He was a gambler. He lost everything we had in a card game." To Judge Caldwell. Ethan listened, a sense of dread growing in his stomach. "Just as we were about to be evicted," Grace continued, "my mother discovered she had a claim to a valuable piece of property, an inheritance from her grandfather. Before she could file the claim, she had an accident. A fall down the stairs. She died 3 days later." The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture even darker than he had imagined. "The property she was claiming," Grace said, her eyes meeting his. "It was the cornerstone of Caldwell's timber empire, the most valuable stand of old-growth pine in 3 counties. She took a shaky breath. "It's the northern section of your farm, Ethan." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. His land. The land he had fought for, bled for. It wasn't his. It was built on a crime, a murder. "That's what Michael discovered in those documents," Grace whispered. "Not just the recent land grabs. The original crime, the one that started it all." And that's when he saw it. As they crested the hill overlooking his farm, he saw the flickering orange light. 3 riders were circling his cabin, torches in their hands. "Get down!" he yelled, pulling the wagon to a halt behind a stand of trees. "Stay here!" He leaped from the wagon, running for the barn where he kept his rifle. He had to get to the creek bed. It would give him cover. They hadn't set the cabin on fire yet. That meant they were looking for something. The documents. He reached the creek, moving fast. The riders had dismounted. One stood guard while the other 2 went inside. Ethan raised his rifle, took aim, and fired. The guard went down, clutching his leg. The other 2 burst out of the cabin, guns drawn. Ethan fired again, deliberately missing, sending them scrambling for cover. He didn't want a fight. He just wanted them gone. It worked. They dragged their wounded man onto his horse and galloped away. Ethan approached the cabin cautiously. The inside was destroyed. They had torn it apart, looking for the documents. Anger, hot and choking, rose in his throat. He returned to the wagon. "They're gone," he said to Grace, "but they were looking for the documents." "They were never there," she said. "I wouldn't have put you in that much danger." Relief washed over him. "Good, but we can't stay here. Caldwell will send more men." "Where will we go?" Lily asked, her small voice full of fear. Ethan looked at the piece of paper Joshua Reed had given him. An address. And a name. Thomas Peterson. The name hit him with the force of a memory he had tried to bury for 5 long years. The Petersons. The neighbors he had been helping. The night his family died. The road to the Peterson farm was a road of ghosts. Every tree, every turn reminded him of that night. Grace sensed his turmoil. "These people," she said softly. "They're connected to what happened to your family." His hands tightened on the reins. "I was helping Thomas with his barn, the night the fire started. If I had been home—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The guilt was a physical weight, a stone in his gut he had carried for 5 years. As they pulled into the Petersons' yard, a man emerged from the barn. Thomas Peterson. He was older, grayer, but his eyes were the same. The 2 men stood in silence for a long moment. Then Thomas stepped forward and pulled Ethan into a rough, heartfelt hug. "Thought you might never find your way back here," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Wouldn't have, except for necessity," Ethan admitted. Thomas saw Grace and the children in the wagon. "Joshua Reed sent word you might be coming," he said. "Said you stood up to the judge right in the middle of church." A slow grin spread across his face. "Wish I'd been there to see it." Hannah Peterson came out of the house, her eyes filling with tears when she saw Ethan. But her practical nature took over when she saw Grace's condition. Within minutes, Grace was settled on a sofa in the parlor. The twins were upstairs in a warm bed, and Lily was in the kitchen with a plate of cookies. Later, on the porch, Thomas listened as Ethan explained everything. The documents, the murder, the stolen land. "What's your plan now?" Thomas asked. Ethan looked through the window at Grace, watching Lily in the kitchen. A feeling he couldn't name twisted in his chest. "I don't know," he admitted. Thomas put a hand on his shoulder. 5 years is a long time to punish yourself, Ethan. What happened to Emma and Sarah? It wasn't your fault. "I should have been there," Ethan insisted, the old wound tearing open. "Maybe," Thomas said gently, "but you weren't, and torturing yourself won't bring them back. But maybe helping that woman and her children can." That night, Ethan and Grace talked by the fire. He learned more about her life, her loveless marriage arranged by the judge, and the genuine love she had found with Michael. He told her about the meeting Joshua Reed was organizing, a gathering of townsfolk who were tired of living under Caldwell's thumb. "We need the documents, Grace," he said. "This might be our only chance." She hesitated, fear in her eyes. Then resolve hardened her face. "They're at Martha Quinn's house," she said, "hidden in a false bottom in my mother's old trunk." The next morning, Ethan rode for town. He took back roads, avoiding patrols. Martha was waiting for him. "Took you long enough," she said, leading him to the trunk. Inside, beneath a false bottom, was a leather portfolio. "Michael brought this to me the night before he died," she said, her hands trembling as she gave it to him. "He said if anything happened to him, I was to keep it safe for Grace." Inside was everything. The original deed to her mother's land, letters proving Caldwell's bribery and extortion, a meticulous record of a criminal empire, and Michael's notes, connecting it all. "This is enough to ruin him," Ethan said. "If it reaches the right authorities?" Martha cautioned. As he was leaving, he was cornered. Sheriff Davis and 2 deputies stepped out from the trees, rifles aimed at his chest. "That's far enough, Ward," the sheriff said. "The judge wants a word with you." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let them get the portfolio. He was about to make a desperate move when another voice cut in. "3 against 1 seems hardly sporting, Sheriff." Joshua Reed stepped into the clearing, a shotgun in his arms. 2 other men from town, the blacksmith and the miller, were with him. The odds had suddenly changed. Davis hesitated. He looked at Reed's shotgun, then at the determined faces of the other men. "This isn't over, Ward," he said, backing down. "Watch your back." Reed clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "The meeting is tonight," he said. "The old Miller barn. Be there." Ethan rode not to the Petersons, but back to his own ruined cabin. He stood in the wreckage of his former life and felt a strange sense of release. This place was just wood and nails. What mattered now was somewhere else. That evening, a group gathered in the abandoned barn. Farmers, shopkeepers, men who had been wronged by Caldwell. And in the back, a surprising figure stood alone. Sheriff Davis. The plan was simple: get the documents to the federal marshal in Omaha. But the crowd was skeptical. Why would the marshal believe them over a powerful judge? "Because we have more than documents," Ethan said, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "We have an eyewitness." Lily stepped forward, her small voice ringing out in the silent barn. "I saw my grandfather and another man push my papa off the balcony. I saw him fall." A stunned silence followed. Then Sheriff Davis stepped forward. "I have something to add," he said, his voice full of shame. He pulled out a folded paper. "This is a confession from Joseph Mercer, the judge's foreman. He's the one who pushed Michael Sullivan, on Caldwell's direct orders." He looked at the crowd. "Caldwell has held my gambling debts over my head for years. But there's a line. What he did to Mrs. Sullivan's legs, ordering men to break them while her children watched, that was the line." The room erupted. The evidence was overwhelming. They had him. A small group was chosen. Ethan, Reed, and Sheriff Davis would take the documents and Lily to Omaha at first light. The others would stay and guard the Peterson farm. Back at the farm, Grace was waiting. He told her the plan. "And then?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "Then justice," he said. "The stolen lands will be returned, including yours." He looked at her, his heart in his throat. "That land was never mine to begin with. That needs to be set right. She reached for his hand. What if we could find a way to set it right? Together. The question hung in the air. He looked at their joined hands, at her face, and felt something shift inside him. "I'd like that," he said, his voice rough. "Very much." Dawn broke, cold and clear. The riders were ready, but just as they were about to leave, Martha Quinn galloped into the yard. "Caldwell's gone!" she shouted. "Fled in the night! Someone at the meeting must have warned him!" A traitor. The news sent a chill through the group. "It doesn't change the plan," Ethan said. "We still need to make this official. Get warrants issued. Cut off his escape." He went inside to say goodbye to Grace. "Be careful," she whispered. "He's most dangerous when he's cornered." He held her gaze. "We'll be back. With a future we can build together." Her eyes shone with tears. "I'll hold you to that promise, Ethan Ward." Then, chaos. A rifle shot cracked through the morning air. Thomas burst through the door. "Caldwell! He's here! With a dozen men!" Ethan's blood ran cold. "Where's Lily?" "Outside with Reed! They're pinned down behind the barn!" Ethan ran out into a hailstorm of bullets. The yard was a battlefield. He saw Lily and Reed crouched behind a water trough, cut off. He had to get to them. Sheriff Davis appeared at his side. "I'll draw their fire left," he yelled. "You go right!" Davis broke cover, guns blazing. As Caldwell's men turned to fire at him, Ethan sprinted, diving behind a chicken coop, then scrambling the rest of the way to the barn. He reached Lily, pulling her into his arms. "I knew you'd come," she said. "Always." Then a voice came from inside the barn. "That won't be necessary." Judge Caldwell stepped out, a pistol in his hand. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a mess, but his eyes were pure ice. "The documents, Ward," he said calmly. "Hand them over, and maybe I'll let the child live." Ethan shielded Lily with his body. "It's over, Caldwell." A mirthless smile touched the judge's lips. "Is that what you think? That I'm running?" "No, I'm relocating to Mexico. But first, those documents must be destroyed." His eyes fell on Lily. "Such a troublesome child. I should have dealt with you when I dealt with your father." He raised the pistol. Time slowed to a crawl. Ethan was about to draw his own weapon to risk everything when another shot rang out. It didn't come from Caldwell's gun. The judge looked down in surprise at the red stain spreading across his shirt. He looked back at Ethan, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible," he murmured. Then he crumpled to the ground. Ethan spun around. Sheriff Davis stood in the barn doorway, his rifle still raised. "You always did talk too much, Judge," the sheriff said quietly. "With their leader dead, Caldwell's men lost their nerve. Some surrendered. Others fled." In the sudden silence, Ethan swept Lily into his arms. "It's over," he whispered. "It's really over." Later that day, after the prisoners had been taken to town and the wounded tended to, Ethan and Grace sat on the porch. "I've been thinking," Grace said, taking his hand, "about setting things right together." He turned to her. "I meant it. The land that was your mother's, it should go to you. But I've worked it. Made it thrive." He took a breath. "Maybe we could make it thrive together." Her eyes softened. "Is that a proposal, Ethan Ward?" "Not yet," he said. "A beginning. A promise of what could be." She smiled, a real, true smile that warmed him to his soul. "A beginning. I like that." Months passed. A new house stood where the old cabin had been, built by the hands of a grateful town. The northern section of the farm was legally Grace's, the southern section Ethan's. But the line on the map meant nothing. It was all theirs. One sunny afternoon, with their friends around them, Lily asked a question that brought everything into focus. "Does this mean Mr. Ward won't ever have to leave?" Ethan knelt down to her level. "Would you like me to stay, Lily? For good?" She nodded seriously. "You're already our pa. But Mama says sometimes people need to say things properly, with promises." He rose and turned to Grace. His voice was thick with emotion. "Grace, I'd like to make those proper promises, if you're willing." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm willing." Right there, on the porch of the home they had built from ashes, with the people who had become their family, they were married. That night they sat together, watching the stars. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said, his arm around her. "A family. A purpose." "Nor I," she whispered. He looked out at the vast moonlit prairie. "When I first came here, I thought this was the promised land. After the fire, it became a prison." He pulled her closer. "Now I know. The promised land isn't a place. It's people. It's the courage to begin again." He looked into her eyes. "It's you." From broken pieces, they had built something whole, something stronger. On the land that had seen so much sorrow, they had planted hope. And their harvest was just beginning. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. What was the most shocking twist for you?